Linda and Paul, we're just getting organized a little bit. Janet.
Good.
Is it me or am I on twice?
You are on twice, Linda.
Okay, let me try to fix that. Okay. Okay.
I think you're all set, Linda.
Okay. I think I'm all set. Hello, all.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just so you know, I'm literally in the hallway of Boxwood with dancers running by me. So like, don't expect too much from this end. It's not great. The Wi-Fi isn't good in the rooms, so
No worries.
it's a little chaotic. Kamara just messaged me and said he's running like 4 minutes late. So I don't know. I guess we want to wait for, well,
Yeah, one of the
do
things
you want to wait for him?
Sure, we're happy to, because we're still working on a presentation. One of the things we were going to propose to everybody is give you a draft presentation of what we would like to present tonight, and then get feedback from you of what other information you think would be helpful to provide to the full committee. It's something that we've been working on. I want to thank Michelle again. This has been nonstop work for her, really since this part of the budget fiscal year became live for us at the, third week in May, to try to figure this stuff out. And we're hoping that what we put together will kind of give an understanding of why we're where we are and then a proposed pathway moving forward. But we feel like we have got a couple hours between now and the committee meeting. So if you said to us, hey, it would be helpful to know this or that, I guess that's kind of our thought process, because we want to be as clear and transparent as we can tonight. So if that sounds decent to all of you, when you're ready, we'll kind of launch into that.
Okay, so Kumar is here. So do you want me to call the meeting to order? Are we? Oh, also, it doesn't sound. Oh, there's Scott. Okay. So I'll wait. But I was going to. Well, let me just call the meeting to order. So let's call the meeting to order. Wednesday, June 28th at 4:04 p.m. Is anyone able to take notes?
I'll take minutes.
Thank you. And so we have Linda, Paul, Scott, Kumara, and I, and Jim and Michelle.
You know what? Maybe share it with them. I think well, Michelle was just.
Can I share this, Bear? Okay.
And so I was going to go through the presentation, but we were also going to share the presentation with all of you, so you can take a look at it. And Scott, what we were saying earlier is that we were intending to give you the presentation and then get feedback from all of you about, would add details here, or if you feel like there's some more supporting documents that would be helpful to the committee if they're going to help inform their decision. We're open to all of that. It's just extremely live for a lot of us. So be honest, Barry Sklar's at the other end of the table, working on slides as we speak, because we're just trying to put this all together in the best format we can think of, given the time constraints of where we're at. So
I'm assuming Malia's going to join.
Yep.
Oh, here she is.
Please, I just shared it. Let me know if you didn't get it or got it. Like,
my thought is too, I'll do a screen share and present it in this way too. So if you want to listen and follow along on your own copy, or if you want to try to follow on the screen, we can do it that way as well.
but it'll help Linda for your notes as well.
Sorry, where did you send it? In the email?
I sent it an email. I shared it an email.
Okay.
Or you should get an email that I shared it.
Okay.
I got it.
Yeah, the title on it is BNF 62823.
Yep. looks like it.
Are you ready? Do you want Jim to start?
Yes,
Someone's getting some background noise. I'm not sure who.
Yeah, could be me, but I'm on a headphone, so
Uh,
but it's pretty loud here. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, just
So I'll
usually
just. Do
people
you want me?
mute. Yeah,
I'm-
everyone mute unless you're
yeah,
talking. That's
I'm just
usually
gonna
the best thing.
okay.
So I want to get back to the beginning if I can. Cancel.
Just, can you scroll it or page up, page down? There you go. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Maybe
I'm here. I'm just printing it, so I ran out of paper.
Nope, and it's my fault. I was just trying to make sure it was presented in the
Yeah.
right form for everybody, but we just wanted you to have it. And Malia, I don't know if you heard me say it earlier. The hope is that we get feedback from folks, and if you feel like further documentation or further details would be helpful, we have some time between now and the general meeting that we could work on the presentation and have it in a better format. And so I want to thank Barry and Michelle for all their hard work. Barry to get the presentation ready, and Michelle for just crunching the numbers continuously as she has since she joined us 10 months ago or 7 months ago, 7 months ago.
And Barry is working on this presentation as we speak, so it's by no means final. It's just where we're at right at this minute.
And we have
We're
this.
working by the minute.
This is absolutely a dress rehearsal, so this hasn't been practiced. So if it's a little unsmooth, I apologize. But here we go. So can everyone see that? Okay. And so, obviously we changed the title, but, the purpose of tonight's presentation is really to give further clarification about our request to amend the FY23 budget to utilize excess and deficiency to support that amendment, and then potentially look at amending or using excess and deficiency to adjust the town assessments in the FY24 budget. And so one of the first things we want to share with you is where we are in FY23. And, I think it's important to acknowledge that we've been talking about FY23 really since the August meeting of the school committee, and that we had concerns and had shared concerns at that time about how the FY23 budget was developed.
Have Linda mute.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. And due to the inadequate budget process used to build the FY23 budget, that there were a number of areas that were significantly underfunded. And we first talked about this concern in August of 22, and we actually further highlighted it when we started doing our budget presentations and budget retreats in January 23. One of the first things Michelle did when she joined the district was suggest a budget freeze, which was announced in January and implemented on February 1st. And despite these tight controls and the effort to make sure that we weren't doing any excessive or even additional discretionary spending, the lack of proper funding in a number of appropriations couldn't be mitigated. And so we've had a couple areas in particular that were not funded appropriately and have led to us having a budget shortfall. And there are really four primary areas, and I talked about this the last school committee meeting. Benefits and insurance is one. Where we were budgeted and what was actually expended was we've expended $851,000 more than what was budgeted. This is obviously something that's not in our control. Our expenses in those areas are what they are. But clearly the fact that it wasn't budgeted properly has, it's created an issue here. One area, and we'll talk about this eventually, is it makes us concerned a little bit about how we've budgeted this for FY24 as well. I think we assumed that the number was true because you should be able to forecast exactly what these expenses are going to be if you know what the rate increases are, but they did not do that when they built the FY23 budget. The other area where we've overexpended is operations and maintenance. That's gone over by about $580,000. I'd say the two areas where that has primarily been impacted is utilities, and so natural gas and electricity wasn't properly forecasted in terms of what those increases are. And the other one is operational building maintenance things. Well, we've had a number of issues where whether it's been elevators or other unforeseen expenses that have happened in our buildings, and those two areas really account for almost all of the $580,000 where we've exceeded what was allotted to us or budgeted. The other two areas where the budget hasn't met the needs of the district are special education tuitions, and then also special education transportation. And those are the final two remaining areas, and much like benefits insurance, really aren't within our control. These aren't discretionary spending areas that we could have just cut out. These are expenses that are guaranteed by the IEP process, and then also by the transportation needs that are brought on or the placement needs that are brought on in those meetings. So, one of the first things we'll do when we know we have other revenue sources that we can tap into, and we may have gone over what was budgeted in a fiscal year, is to look at what do we have available to us. And so the areas we've looked to mitigate those particular line items being over were our grants. And one of the things what we've done, to get that number down is we've appropriated about $1,168,000 of available grant funds to bring that number down. We've also looked at our revolving accounts, and specifically what we would be proposing is to take $892,000 from two of our revolving accounts. School choice, we'd be looking to take $575,000 out of, and out of our transportation revolving, we'd be looking to take $317,000 approximately out of. The use of these grant and revolving funds, they don't require a budget amendment. We're just trying to be transparent and let people know, like, we haven't just gone to saying we need to amend the budget. We've tried to use best practice and look at what we do have available and what we're comfortable spending in our revolving accounts, and then also to use our grants appropriately. We're not going where we're taking the grant funds out of appropriate grant years. And so, this is normal practice. We would be doing this really in any fiscal year. With that, though, even after we make those allocations, even after the grant revolving funds adjustment, the FY23 budget is projected to be overspent by approximately $1 million. And so what we're recommending to the school committee is that we utilize $1 million of certified excess and deficiency funds to be used as an additional revenue in FY23. And in order for us to do that, the FY23 budget would need to be amended, and we would amend it and then add this $1 million in excess and deficiency as a revenue source. It's important to note that we've received this year approximately $500,000 in excess deficiency revenues for this fiscal year. And so, in all likelihood, at a minimum, we'll be adding $500,000 to our excess and deficiency next year. The other thing we'd want people to know is we haven't bottomed out our revolving accounts. We feel like that would not be the right approach. We could have, and again, to be transparent, if we bottomed out or zeroed out all of our grants and all of our revolving funds, we could end up not having to need a budget amendment. We could clear this out. However, in our estimation, to do so would be irresponsible heading into FY24, where we'd have absolutely zero cushion or ability to adjust if we had unintended expenditures that we need to address in FY24. And so we just don't feel like that's the right way to go. And so we would still have some adequate balances remaining in our revolving accounts for next year. Well, it wouldn't be as healthy as we would want it to be, but at least there enough of a cushion that if we need to make adjustments that next fiscal year, we could do so. And so you know, one of the other things we would also put out to school committee is in the preliminary budget discussions with town officials, you know, we feel like it was put out there that we would consider the use of E&D to reduce FY24 town assessments. And while the available balance is not as much as we hoped, especially if we're tapping into $1 million of our excess and deficiency to adjust our assessment or our budget in FY23, we believe the district can afford to return $250,000 of E&D to the towns for FY24. We think that's important because we've established a practice where we've given them close to $1 million or more for the last 3 or 4 years. We can look at that historical view. And while I think in the future we need to do more to hold on to our excess and deficiency and start to build that total up closer to the 5% that we're able to hold on to, because one of the things I think we continue to learn is that it's not out of order, or it's realistic to expect at times, especially in uncertain kind of liquid expenditure amounts, so whether it's utilities or special education, that you could have a variance of 1% or more, and ultimately the district, it's going to equal about $1 million. And when you have a budget that's, you know, $116 million, and, you know, this could happen again. And I think that we probably have been giving too much excess and deficiency for the last few years to the towns. We need to build our own base in excess and deficiency, but it's also hard when the towns have expected that they're going to get $1 million plus in many of these accounts. And, you know, in FY23, not only did we give excess and deficiency, we also used a lot of our revolving accounts to supplement that budget. I think it's kind of like, hey, we said we would do this if we could. And in the future, we're not going to be able to offer excess and deficiency. We need you to plan for that. But in this moment, knowing that a town like Paxton had to dip into their own emergency stabilization funds to meet the budget, and a town like Rutland that needed to go and provide an override, we feel like it would be a good gesture and an important point in trying to build trust that we make that $250,000 available to the towns and defray their assessments. And that is really to continue a transparent, collaborative, supportive relationship between the district and member towns. And we feel like ultimately that's going to help us in that process. One thing to take a look at, what would that mean? And we broke down what the impact would be for the individual assessments for those towns. In Holden, it would mean a reduction of their assessment of approximately $125,000. So their percentage increase would be 4.58% instead of 4.94%. One reminder I tell the committee is that they had asked us to stay within 4%. And so this still doesn't bring 3 of our member towns below that 4% threshold, but it gets them closer to that. Paxton, it would bring below the 4% threshold. They'd have a reduction of approximately $20,000, $23,000 in their assessment. For Princeton, it'd be a difference in the assessment of about $15,000, but it would bring their percentage down to 3.84%. Rutland would have a reduction from 9.55% down to 9.12%, of a difference of about $60,000. And in Sterling, there'd be an adjustment in their assessment percentage from 4.91% down to 4.64%, which is a difference of about $34,000. So, you know, once again, just looking at the recommendations, we're looking for approval from the school committee. It's to amend the FY23 budget to increase the total expenditures by $1 million. It's to use excess and deficiency funds of $1 million to accommodate the amended FY23 budget increase. I think, again, this would have no impact on the town assessments for FY23. However, it would allow us to put a close and balance the books for FY23. The other thing we're requesting is that the committee consider the use of $250,000 for excess and deficiency funds to reduce the town assessments for fiscal year 24. And so open to feedback or further discussion or clarification at this time, along with if you feel like there are other supporting documentation that would be helpful for the committee to see.
So first of all, thank you very much for, why am I on mute? Okay, I'm not mute. Sorry. So thank you very much for all of that and all your hard work. I really appreciate it. I know that that was very crunched for you guys to get that done. So I have just a couple of questions, and if it's okay, Malaya, I see your hand. I will call on you next. So is it okay if I just throw out the 4 questions, if you want to write them down, and then in the course of discussion, like they don't have to all be answered in a row because they're in different areas, but I'm just going to throw them out there. And then Kamara, I'll get to you too. So these are just my questions. Again, just going to throw them out there. So one was the grant money that we're using. What was that going to be used for if we use it to cover these areas? Another one is what is left in the revolving accounts. So I just want to know what's left in that versus what we're using. For the special ed costs, is that including the circuit breaker that we would get back? So is that being factored in? And then my final question was regarding E&D and giving the towns the 250 or what money we move from revolving, et cetera, is you had mentioned that for FY24 that the benefits might not be calculated properly, and that was over 500,000. And right now for E&D, I know you don't know it exactly, but you said we're at 500,000, and so it makes me wonder if we have enough for next year for some of those things that were based on numbers that weren't correct to begin with. Because I personally do agree that the gesture would be nice, but when things are that tight and we're that over, I just want to make sure we really can afford to give them the $250,000. So those are kind of my questions.
Can we try to answer those first, Jenna,
Yeah.
just before we move on to others? Because I'm afraid, like, if
Yes.
we get too big of a list, it'll be hard
Yeah.
to keep it straight. So
Yeah, however you want to do it.
the grant money, we feel like we're not pushing anything. So nothing's not being covered by the grants. And so in many cases, like I'll share with you, we have an IDA grant for special education that we had $500,000 available for this FY23 year. Okay. And so if we didn't expend that, and we're not planning on expending it all, it would just be rolled over into next year. Because typically with the special education grants, you have a couple years where you can build down those costs. Okay. And so out of 500 available for FY23, this fiscal year, we'd be taking about 375 of that, and we'd still be rolling over $125,000. And all of the areas that we would be expending on is appropriate for that grant. Really what you're just doing is reallocating some things. And so what it means is we're not going to have $500,000 extra to spend next year, but it's this fiscal year. And so it makes sense that we spend it down. And that's really true for a lot of the grants that we've used. There's nothing that we've taken out that would have been supported by these grants, because the grants that we're expending aren't for next fiscal year, they're for this fiscal year. And so some of the adjustments that we made, like one of the things we've been going back and forth at, and I know one of the things that made me gulp when we first talked about this in business finance is, Michelle gave the original number of about $2,500,000 that we were over. And, really, if you add up what I presented at the beginning of this presentation, it's really 3 million, right? When you look at facilities, out of district sped tuitions, out of district transportation, and then our insurance liabilities, when you add up all those 4 things, it comes to about $3 million. However, every year we're going to go through this process where we look at circuit breaker, we look at our grants, and we look at our revolvings and make adjustments. That's what they're there for. But I can tell you with confidence, we're not doing anything with our grants and saying not funding something. We're using them appropriately. It's just we hadn't spent them down yet. Okay. And that's why, one of the things we were toying with, Scott had emailed us earlier today, and it's like, what can you share? I don't want to give somebody a $3 million sheet because it's not really $3 million. We would always be doing this. We would always be spending down our grants. And I think it creates kind of a false narrative. We're not, you would expect to do this every year. Not the excess and deficiency, but the spending down the grants and utilizing your revolvings a little bit. So, I think we're okay on that. And I have full confidence with what we're spending on the grants. And no, there's nothing that we're missing out on by making these adjustments. We would be doing this naturally. We're not rolling over as much as we could have spent in FY24, but it's all FY23 grant funds. So totally appropriate use of them. In terms of revolving balances, can you pull that up?
Yeah, so, yeah,
And
and I
so-
just want to say one thing on the grants, that like, that's not like, we're just saying this, like Jim said, we came at 3 million. We would have, like, we wouldn't have come in at that had I been able to look at grants all along to be able to make sure that all the appropriate spending was done out of those. Like, we got to spend our grants.
Yeah.
It's so it's not an, it's not an over.
It's a bad
over.
it's a
Yeah.
bad analogy, right? But what I what I keep on saying to people is we've been flying a 747 blind, okay, because we were mired in FY22. And we finally closed out FY22 in the beginning of May. And then the radar got turned on May 22nd. And then we could really take a live look at where we were with FY23. And, we didn't have the ability to know what line items were over. Now, thankfully, like when you look at that list and the line items that are over, those aren't things that we have control over. It's not, yes, a little bit facilities, although when I look at where we overspent, and I can tell you that we can get you more granular detail, either in a future business and finance meeting, or certainly we're happy to give further details when we get together as a full committee in July. But when you look at where we've exceeded what was budgeted, it's understandable. Okay, you're looking at utilities where natural gas and electricity were quite high this year, higher than anticipated, than were budgeted. And then the other thing is, we know this, our buildings are falling apart, and we haven't been putting money into them. And unfortunately, and Mark can put this together for us, Mark Wild, but we had a bunch of stuff go south, including elevators and other things that are extremely expensive. And so you get up to that number quickly. And Jana, you made the point, and I think it's a good one, that we have to be mindful. If you ask Michelle and I, what are our concerns about FY24? It is the fact that we're going to have to look at an adjustment for our benefits, right? Our insurance, because we took the number in FY23 to be true, and it's not. And so we are going to have to make an adjustment and figure out some strategies in terms of FY24. I think the other area too is Michelle, and I think very wisely, when she looked at our actual expenditures that she could figure out in FY22 and FY23 and building our facilities budget. And this is off the top of my head, but I think we figured in about an increase of about $360,000. That's great, and it's a start, but we have to do a couple things. We have to know that we're probably going to need to budget even more in the future. And then the other thing, which I do feel better about, is Michelle's loaded the budget already for FY24, and we're going to get it down to more appropriate line items. So what we're talking about now, which we became aware of May 23rd, we're going to be watching all year long. And, we're going to be able to say at the end of August, hey, look at our facilities line, or look at our benefits, and we're going to be able to plan. That's where I feel better about this. So instead of, if you're going to take the 747 analogy, we're going to know as soon as we're over New York, as we're heading to LA, what the radar says. We're not going to be over Reno, Nevada, and then go, oh my gosh, this is, where we are. And so I think it's going to make a difference for us. But those are, the questions are, you're on point. You're right. Those are areas we have to be aware of. So for revolving balances, if we make the adjustments, Jana, that we have proposed, we would still have
1.1 million between the two.
And so
we have 843 in circuit breaker.
we would still retain $843,000 in circuit breaker. We'd still have that available in FY24. Okay. And then we would have 333,500 in school choice remaining. And so, would I like those to be a little bit higher? Yeah, but it's actually higher than the amounts that I had projected originally when I presented to you in August. And so those remain pretty healthy. Just so the committee knows, look, we could have hit circuit breaker or school choice. They both would have been appropriate to spend down based on the things we're spending down them on. But what I would say to you is one of the reasons why the excess and deficiency recommendation and budget assessment or adjustment is so high at $1 million is because we wanted to retain balances in those revolvings. We felt like, we could have cleared it out. We could have cleared out the revolvings and not asked for a budget assessment adjustment. But that really would not put us in a good position for next year. And we need to have the flexibility like we had this year to look at some adjustments in terms of grants and revolvings. We have to have that that ability built in for next year, because it's just something with the size of budget and with, like I said, a percent fluctuation either way, you're going to want to have that ability in place. So not where we ultimately wanted to be, not ultimately where we would want to be for excess and deficiency, but still in a position that we could hopefully support, especially if FY24, we've got a good hold on what we're expending from day one now, and we can report to people. And I think we're going to be reporting to you in business and finance, and saying, hey, here's the update, here's where we are. And so we'll have more confidence that we're not going to be as surprised as we've gone through the month of June. And one of the things, honestly, that was hard for us as well wasn't just that, the switch got turned on when we loaded FY23. It was also trying to understand the checks and balances, the ebbs and flows of our payroll. Our payroll is what, 6 million?
On a biweekly basis,
yeah.
like 2.5.
Oh, 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay. So on a monthly basis, 5, but biweekly, it's a $2.5 million fluctuation. So a lot of times, depending what's being paid out contract wise, it's hard to know where you stand.
There's some bigger ones for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that we were finally able to do is Michelle could finally clear that out and knew it was encumbered and have a really good, solid look at where we truly stand. And that just happened today. So that's something we've got to learn to live with a little bit better as we move forward.
Can I say one more thing about leaving money in the revolvings? We're not done with FY23. There's still like a couple. We'll do another warrant for accounts payable on I think we do it on July 15th. That is all bills that didn't get paid yet, because you don't get your bill for June until July. So we put that back. So if for some reason something goes awry, or there's some like I told you in the last meeting, like we're waiting on the legal services invoice that we haven't been billed for a long time. So if I deplete those revolving accounts, I've got nothing to fall back on. Should the budget be more overexpended than I anticipated. So, I want to be safe in this fiscal year, as well as be prepared for next fiscal year.
And I'd say, this question may come up, and we would just want to assure you that we feel comfortable that we're not going to need more than $1 million. And so, our hope would be after this is that, there would be a little bit more in excess and deficiency beyond the extra revenue, because you asked about that, Jana, in terms of where would we stand for excess and deficiency. I think we would have confidence that we'd land around $700,000 in excess and deficiency before, perhaps if there are some encumbrances that are in place right now that we end up clearing and not needing to spend. Before that gets added to excess and deficiency, I think we'd be sitting around $700,000 next year. But it's hard because we won't know that until it's certified. But
Yes,
that's our best
yeah,
estimate about where it would be.
We don't know until we're done.
Yeah,
And-
and it could be. I would think it's more likely that it's more than 700, but we have to be prepared that it wouldn't be. And I think to Michelle's point, that's where we're trying to make sure there's sufficient movement. What we don't want to do is undershoot. You know what I mean? And that's why we're going with $1 million, because we have confidence that we'll be able to cover it. And worst comes to worst, it's just going to go back into excess and deficiency anyways. That answer you? Did I hit you all your questions, or?
Yes, you did, which I appreciate. Okay, so I will move on to Malaya next.
All right. Thank you all. I know you're in the middle of lots of work, and I appreciate it. Okay, I had a couple of the questions that Jana asked, so I will cross those off my list. Trying to think of how to phrase this. My thought is this, and I'm not going to be surprised to you all. I've said this since October or November, and even last year. I appreciate wanting to give funds back to the towns. However, when I look at the calculations of this, our E&D will be a net minus 500,000 over what you've proposed for the next 2 years. Given the uncertainties that we have in our budget currently, the uncertainties we all have about electricity and gas, and we have a transportation contract coming up next year. We have a new law firm, who knows where that will go. I think there's a lot of uncertainties. And personally, I'm not 100% comfortable taking money out of E&D when especially when we've already had the budget approved without it. This is my personal opinion. Well, I understand it's one of those situations where there's the ideal that you'd like to do, and there's the reality of our fiscal responsibility to our district. And sometimes you can't do both. So my personal opinion is to be a little leery of this, honestly. And part of it's probably because I've been around a long time. But one of the things that I honestly could not go back and look, but I started to. I don't recall using $1 million in E&D in the past. I remember last year, I think, or the year before, we used $850,000, and that was a huge jump. And that was a very lengthy school committee discussion to go from about 500,000 to 850,000. And it was COVID extenuating circumstances. And it was a very lengthy discussion. And I don't remember using more than that. That's the most I recall. So I'd like to know how much we've spent, like the past maybe 5 years before COVID, because that was a COVID-based discussion.
Yeah, you didn't, two years, Malia, you didn't have, you used zero.
Jim, you have an echo all of a sudden.
Is anyone on?
Yeah.
I'm not on.
No.
Oh. Can you just mute me?
It might be,
Still echoing.
Are we still echoing?
I think it was, no, it's not Malia.
Now it's good.
They're not hearing your feedback, just us.
Right.
Okay. Barry, we had a sheet that showed E&D and what it was.
I had it 2000, when I
Can you
looked,
pull it up and we can read it to them? We're gonna read you what E&D has been.
I know it was 2019 was 150,000, nothing in 2020, nothing in 2021. And then 2022 was 750. And then this year it was 850. So that was what it was.
I thought one year it was over $1 million, but maybe it wasn't.
So
$1 million. This year it would be over $1 million because we're asking to utilize the next $1 million.
Okay.
So it'd be
So
$1
I
million
appreciate
50.
Can you look it up? Please?
So I appreciate that okay, let me back up then. So there's two different things. So using the $1 million to settle FY23, I'm more okay with that. Using any amount to give back to the towns in 24, especially given what you just told me, which fits my recollection that the only reason we spent so much in those 2 other years was because it was a highly unusual situation with COVID. And there were a lot of excess expenses. There were uncertainty about the state. There were so many things we were dealing with COVID those 2 years. They were exceptional years for everyone.
2022 was 50
Right.
and 850. And what I would say about this year, it may not have been E&D. That was 850. I mean, it was 850, but you also, from your revolving
Sorry.
account.
Jim, it's echoing a lot. It's really hard to understand you. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where it's coming from.
You're okay now.
You're fine now. It's strange.
Any idea? I'm gonna. Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right. I won't be able to hear you, but it's turning down the speaker. So this past year, one of the things. Can I have the revolving? Not only did we look to use the E&D as a revenue source, but in FY23, what the district proposed is that they were going to use the ECC revolving, school lunch, transportation stabilization, and circuit breaker. They were listed as revenue sources in the budget. And so that's where I get over $1 million. I feel like those aren't things that we should be putting as revenue sources in the budget. Those are things that it would be anticipated that you may want to access, but the budget should just be built on what the budget request is. And so I was kind of combining E&D with some of those revolvings, but I feel like
Thank you for
that's a
clarifying.
practice we cannot move forward with. It doesn't make sense. And so, and I get your point, and I feel like, you know, they're valid points. And if you ask me, do I have a crystal ball and I know for certain we wouldn't or couldn't use that $250,000? I don't. I do believe, though, that especially when we're pushing forward with a new approach to budgeting, and we're saying, look, we're going to stay away from E&D, you know, until we can get it to a level that we're allowed to have it at, which is 5% of our total budget. You know, then when we're going beyond that, I think we can talk about making it available every year for as a budget revenue source, because we'd be giving it back to the towns. And so we have to change our practice. But I think we're in this intermediate area where, you know, we started a practice and now we're stopping it. And then I also feel like, I feel like a lot of the discussions we had during the budget development process, the towns, I think, you know, especially if we were able to get E&D certified on times, I think their understanding was that we were going to try to make it available. And there's a little bit of and, you know, Milia, you were clear, okay, because I mean, you know, during that meeting that, hey, this has to go with school committee approval. And I'm, you know, Michelle and I make recommendations. Ultimately, the decision is with the committee. And I understand the reservations that you've stated. I think what we're trying to find the balance of is trying again to be transparent, build good relationships and trust, you know, with also being accountable and responsible in building our own budget. And there's not a perfect answer to it. You know, it's just kind of where we're at.
There is not. But I guess, thank you for clarifying where the million came from, so that I mean, that helps, because I was like, I don't remember that. I guess I understand the situation for FY23 amendment. I really, even if we're, I still, despite, I think we are making a good faith effort, because the funds, even if we don't use the FY24 funds and give it back to the towns, I think we are still making good faith efforts, because we have given them a lot of transparency. We have given them a lot of, you know, warning our budget is not set. It's sort of like, I can't think of a good example, honestly, but like, it's, I guess part of me thinks of the process as a whole, right? And it's not up, like, they just care about the bottom line. It's not up to them how we get to the bottom line, or to determine how we get to the bottom line. And I feel like them demanding the E&D is, even after we said it's not required, we've been doing it for a little while, but we have a real budget situation on our hands right now. Some of our towns, a couple of them, have talked about how physically sound they are and how proud they are of how much excess cash they have and how great rating that'll be for their bond ratings and things. Well, we're not in that situation, and we're about to make it worse, because we're trying to give them extra money and be nice neighbors. And while I appreciate the tough situation, even Holden has said, oh, we're very proud of how much free cash we have, and we've built it up, and we're going to have good bond ratings because of it, and that's a great thing. While at the same time telling us not to do that, telling us they want our funds. Honestly, they don't need our funds. I won't say that in the bigger meeting, but they don't need our funds. They have so much free cash, they don't know what to do with it. And ARPA funds. They are very proud of that. They have over $5 million in free cash, but they are telling us to not save our cash because they want some of it. And I do feel bad for our smaller towns who really do have significant funding issues. But I just don't think it's as cut and dried as they make it out to be in there. And because we have no requirement to give them that money. We have passed the budget. Our town residents in all 5 towns passed the budget without the E&D adjustment. And the town managers and FinComs we're told very clearly it's not a requirement, it's not a guarantee. We don't actually even know what the state's going to ultimately do, and we won't know until probably July because they're always late. So that's a huge uncertainty as well. We have hopeful numbers, but we don't know what they're really going to do with transportation or anything else. And so I just feel like I feel like the towns feel entitled to this. I feel like we've been very clear in this particular year that it's not an entitlement and it's something we would look into if we could. But based on the fiscal information we have right now and what we don't have, including the state, I don't think it's fiscally responsible for us to give it back to them, especially because we have an approved budget that doesn't include it. That's my personal opinion.
Well,
I
and,
will just state that
what
Okay.
I'd say-
at
yeah,
this moment.
and you're entitled to your personal opinion, and the school committee is entitled to the ability to vote, and whether they want to accept my recommendation or not, there, that's your right. And I think what I would just assure the committee is, I'm not doing this because I feel like I'm being pressured into it. I'm doing this because I think it's the right thing to do. And I think we have to understand that when we're expending $1 million in excess and deficiency, the towns have the right to challenge that. They have the right to challenge a town meeting. And I feel like, I would just say to you is I feel like it's the right thing to do. And if I was trying to appease them, we'd be offering more than $250,000. I think the conversation we've had around the table is this is the risk or what we would be comfortable in putting towards it. And I would say it is primarily being offered for towns like Paxton that had to dip into their emergency stabilization fund to pass our budget. And towns like Rutland that, needed to pass an override. And I feel like, partly what you do in those situations is you share in the hardships of that decision. And I think that's what we would be doing. But individual committee members should vote the way they feel is appropriate. And I certainly can't argue with your reasoning, particularly around our need to have appropriate funding in the event of a contingency next year. I think we believe that we're providing enough of a cushion. One of the things I would share is that for FY24, we're hoping we're going to be able to access some grants here. So whether it's supporting our implementation of a new ELA curriculum or other things, there are some things that we would hope we would be able to build in terms of cost savings, but can't guarantee it. And, we recently got bad news we shared with facilities last night. We did not get the safety grants, and so it hurts. It hurts when you don't get something like that. And we don't get a lot of grants. Jane's batting 1,000, but the rest of us aren't.
No, I appreciate
Yeah,
that, and I'll let you all move on.
Say one thing?
I didn't mean to imply that you were giving into pressure from the towns. I've seen their letters. I don't even think their letters did what we asked them to do. You asked them for one letter, they sent 4. They did what they wanted. So that's not really building a trust relationship either when they can't follow our simple rules because they're trying to manipulate. That feels manipulative to me.
Okay.
They
So
did
I
initially
appreciate it.
send one letter.
And so, but Malia,
So I
like,
appreciate it. It's a tough spot. So
I
Okay.
understand, but we have to, to me, we want to base it on, I think it gets dangerous personally if we're trying to send messages,
no,
Yeah.
I'll let you guys move on. And I may have a different opinion at the meeting later if there's more information. So it's fine.
I do think too that sometimes you need to give a little in order to get a lot. And next year, we're going to be asking for a big budget. And if we show good faith effort to give what we can give right now, that is really going to help us in the long term to show look, we're in dire straits, but we're still willing to give what we can give. And, next year, I think they'll be better partners with us. I don't want to say they'll be good partners, but they'll be better partners. And trying to build that relationship. If you guys don't see fit for that, I understand the reasoning behind it. But because they could, even this asking to use $1 million in E&D, if they pull a town meeting together and drop it down, we'd be forced to use revolving accounts, and you can't use E&D until it's certified the following year. So then we're really stuck with nothing in our coffers. So we don't want them to balk at the $1 million. So give them a little to show good faith effort that here, we're going to give you a little bit so we can reduce you. So I don't know. That's it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Linda, I think you were next.
I thought Kamara was next and then me, then Paul. Oh, Kamara's left. Okay. For a
No,
moment.
Kamara's back. So
Okay. All right. Kamara
Kamara,
was
did you
next.
want to go? No, Kamara, did you want to go?
Sorry. Actually, so my two questions got answered. One of them was about the grants, and another one was about kind of actually what Michelle just alluded to, about like going forward with town relations. There was one little feedback I wanted to give you, in a bad way at all. I get asked a lot about the way that the grant allocation and when using grants in a situation like this, charging them back. If you can find any simple example you can give, I have one in my hand that I'm using that I always used to explain to myself, but later on tonight, because I think a lot of folks still somehow, it's a tricky concept, but it is like, I think Michelle mentioned earlier, it is used quite often. But just a clear example on that, and to go over that, like in a very high level again. But that was it for now, and I just want to yield the rest of the time to other questions. But if I have any more, I'll definitely raise my hand again.
So I guess what you want some clarification on, we are using grants as we're supposed to use grants. We just, the time that, like at this point, because they haven't been tracked from someone in the business office for the entire year, actually 2 years, we've done our best to keep up. I just haven't gotten the information in a timely basis, but we're not using grants in any unusual way. It's, maybe we shouldn't even say this, like we would be expending these grants. It's just at this moment. And I've already made some of the transfers into the grants already, like they're done. But we had to take a harder look at them to make sure that we were keeping within, covering the budget shortfall. So,
Right. No, I think he got that. I think what he was saying was that later at the school committee meeting, maybe give a little bit of overview of that while you're talking about it, because the public and a lot of people asked the kind of question that I asked. So just to kind of explain that stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Linda.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say that I support the idea of giving the towns back $250,000 for all the reasons that Jim mentioned, that will help to bolster our relationship with them. I want to confirm, I think a couple of my questions have been answered, but I want to confirm why they've the answers. So what's left in E&D if we do this will be 700,000 more or less. Is that correct?
Not
This-
exactly.
This year, there'd be about
250,000.
200,000, 250,000, but we already have captured that there's about $500,000 of additional revenue this fiscal year that, for all
Next year.
intensive purposes, we feel like will definitely be certified for E&D for next year. And so
Okay.
we feel like right now E&D is at $1.4 million,
Mhm.
about. We feel like next year at a minimum, E&D would be at 700,000. Is that where we want it to be long-term? No. We would like to eventually build it up to close to the 5% we're allowed to get it to. But that's going to take some time. Has the district been that low in E&D before? It has. We have the historical viewpoint that they've gone below that quite frequently. Yeah, they've actually been negative at times. I think, Linda, what we were trying to share too is that that's what we have really reasonable confidence that we would be at a minimum for E&D. And so there's certainly a possibility that there are a couple areas where we'll have additional revenue. Like right now, the number we've given in terms of needing $1 million in E&D, that really is covering us in case there are any contingencies. And so what we would never want to do is undershoot that number. And so for all intensive purposes, whether it's encumbrances that we can eventually remove, or because we've built in a little bit of a pad with $1 million, we feel like there's probably going to be some other additional money that can go into E&D. We just don't know what that would be. It could be $25,000. It could be $100,000. It could be a little bit more. We're not doing it purposely, but what we are trying to do is make sure we don't find ourselves in a spot where we should have asked for more than $1 million and we didn't. You know what I mean? And so we're just trying to be safe because, you know, and what we know is, right, is if we don't need it, what will happen is it will just go back into E&D anyways. And so I think, I guess the big message is we have reasonable confidence that yes, E&D next year would be at 700 at a minimum. And then our hope would be is it actually would be a little bit higher than that.
Okay. You might have to explain the math of all that at some point in a little more detail. But anyway, so then my other questions were, let's see. Okay, I was mildly horrified when I heard we had such a large special ed surplus, even though on some level it's good news. But now I believe the explanation is that we were not able to track our spending. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's not that we had a surplus. It's that we actually didn't budget for those actual expenditures, and so we went over by that amount. Okay, and so those 4 item areas where we were over $1 million in our out of district special education tuitions. We were over $1 million over in our out of district special education transportation. We were over what our budget amount was for our facilities, and we were over in what our actual expenses were for insurance. And so all of those we hadn't properly budgeted for.
Right. What I'm talking about is the IDEA grant. I'm sorry, I should have been more specific.
And it's
Yes.
yeah. And so with that, Linda, I think that one of the things we inherited in the district is we had not spent down FY22. And so a lot of the emphasis, because we knew we had to spend down the FY22 funds because they would not be available. There becomes a time when you can't expend anymore. And so there was a balance, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, that we still had an FY22. And so in a lot of ways, we were trying to spend that down first because that had an end point, and that if we didn't spend it down. So there's one of the things I'd share with you that the district has not done well or added to the list is that we had grants from FY21 that hadn't been spent
There have
down.
been some 20s when I got
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we've done a lot just to get to the fiscal years that we're actually under. And so it's not that we didn't spend money in those areas. It's just that we had previous fiscal years that we needed to close out first. And then the other thing I'd share in terms of the IDEA, so that's partly what happened there. And, we talked about it, like special education to me is, it's a lot of it's facilities for me, but then the other, number one, honestly, is how looking at our special education. How do we provide services to kids? How do we budget for it? That to me is one of the linchpins that we need to address in this district.
Lynn, it's not unusual for those IDEA grants. Their 2-year grants are actually 27 months. They can even go into that 3rd year. It is very typical for a school district to keep those open for 2 years. So they're like using they're using a portion of the previous appropriation and then the current, and it just you're always running 2 at a time, which in the end is you're really only running 1. So that's not inappropriate for that funding to be available because they are 2-year grants. They don't expect you to utilize them all in 1 fiscal year.
Okay, that's helpful because I just hear what some parents might be thinking.
Yeah.
Holy smoke, you had $500,000 and you couldn't give my kid, XYZ.
You should ask Jim. I pushed back on him on using it, and then I just stopped and thought about it for a little bit. And
I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. I just,
yeah,
just
but I
because-
pushed back because I'm like, we're going to need that next year. We have
Right.
expenses next year that we're planning, that we will need that. And then it was like, it's out of
Right.
this or it's out of that. It doesn't really matter. That's an easier use.
Yeah.
We can use that whenever. So
I'm just saying, just be prepared to answer that question and maybe put your helmet on.
Well,
So,
Yeah.
but I guess what
and let me
I want to
yeah.
put out there, can I just address that just for a minute, Linda? If
Uh-huh,
you
yeah.
look at it, right,
Mhm.
we under budgeted by $2 million in special education. Okay, so we were over by $1 million in out district tuition, and we were over $1 million, under budgeted by $1 million, and we
Yeah.
apply, or we applied the full balance of that $500,000, we were
Mhm.
still over by 1.5 million. And so
Mhm.
it's not a
Right.
question of underservicing kids or not providing services. We actually exceeded what our budget amount was by
Mhm.
$1.5 million. And I think that's the answer. I
Right,
understand how it looks, but it really
Right.
was just accounting. It wasn't,
right.
it wasn't that the money wasn't expended.
Right, that's the kind of explanation people might need. And so you should just be prepared to state that succinctly so that it comes across clearly. The other, let's see, a couple more other quick things. I think it would be good to mention that we had a budget freeze. Just keep emphasizing that.
Yep.
And I do agree that for the sake of, as I said, I do agree that for the sake of our relationship with the towns, we should give back some E&D. I'm tempted, honestly, to say maybe we could give just enough more that we could bring that number down below million. And this is purely a public relations perspective. Could we get it down to 950,000? Could we get it down to 925? You know, just purely from a public relations perspective, and to keep the relationship with the towns. And let's see, one more thing before I think one challenge in our relationship with the towns is going to be that we told them we're going to have a big deficit. Then we told them, oh, we think it won't be so bad. And now we're telling them, oh, it's bad again. And I think we need to come up with a succinct explanation as to why after saying it's bad, then it's not so bad. And now, why are we saying now it's bad again? I think we need a succinct, like 2-sentence explanation of that.
Can you, and this is just me clarifying my understanding, Linda. And so I think that I look at it, in terms of when it was bad, we talked about how originally last July, we voted or approved the transfer of $1.6 million.
Mhm.
And then it didn't seem quite so bad because that number really ended up to be about $300,000, right?
Right. Mhm.
And so what it speaks to, and then, here we go again. I think that change, what it speaks to is the fact that the district did not have in place the proper way to track our actual expenditures. We weren't loading the budget. We didn't have accurate line items. And so there was no way of knowing where things were at. And in terms of, what the committee voted for last July was the best information that they were given at that time by an interim business manager who was trying to help support the district. And, I think she's just trying to make sure, like we are with the $1 million, we weren't in a situation where we had an unbalanced budget. But when Michelle went through the process, and unfortunately it took, 7 months because she was putting in an entire fiscal year and catching up even more,
Right.
it ended up to be less than that, which is, that's good news, but it's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
What I say about FY24 and the fact that we're over, I've been saying this since August, like literally, I could pull up a slide that I presented in August publicly that I had grave concerns about how the FY23 budget was created. And so, why did we put a spending freeze in place? We put it in place because we knew we weren't able to track expenses and we didn't have confidence in how the budget was created. And if you look at where we've overspent, or where we would make the argument that we are under budgeted, these aren't areas that are discretionary. We don't have control.
Right.
It's not like, we added a water fountain at central office. We went over in special education tuition, special education transportation, our facilities, which, I think we've talked about all year long, really have not been kept up to date and need continuous work. And then the final area was the health benefits, which, I don't know why they didn't plug the right number in, but they didn't. And again, that's not an expense we have control over. Our expenditures for health insurance is what it is.
Right. Right.
So,
All I'm saying is we need a 2 to 3 sentence succinct explanation as to why there were these fluctuations in our expectations. And if it's just that we couldn't track properly, or we had a change from an interim business manager, and we had a change from an interim business manager to our permanent, hopefully, business manager, something along those lines, 2 to 3 sentences. That's all I'm saying.
I'm going to say
It's confusing.
probably the one biggest factor, so you guys know that I think is a big fluctuation. Part of it is, I think our interim business manager gave a report at a point in time with the best information that she had. Okay, so which wasn't quite exact. But the other big piece is we did not have cash reconciled, and there were, I don't even remember how many journal entries I needed to make, some of those affecting expenses. And to a good amount, like there were charges that people got paid but didn't get that pay because it wasn't due to them, they quit or whatever. And there was like $160,000 in expenses that we relieved because we were balancing money that went back into our bank. So guess what, people? FY23 is still not done. So I don't know what direction this is going in. We're not reconciled for FY23. So I think that's the biggest question mark that we're not done doing the accounting for the year. And that's where on FY22, we were in a much bigger mess in FY22. But I don't know for a fact. So we're working on reconciling cash for FY23 as we speak.
Okay. All right. So however you can just
the
boil
biggest
that all down. You
Yeah,
can both just boil all that down to 2 or 3 sentences. That
we'll
would be
do
good.
that. Okay.
That's all my questions for now.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Paul, do you still have a question?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. So when I'm receiving the information, I'm thinking of it in terms of 2 different things, what the presentation is, and then what is the situation behind the presentation. And I think the presentation is really good. It's clear, it's short, which I think is really helpful in this case because it operates at a high level, and I think it's gonna stimulate conversation. And so I think it leaves room for conversation also. I think it's really predictable which questions you're going to get. I think every one of us had some form of Jana's questions. So I think those are the ones you're going to get. And it's good to have predictable questions to start things off. In terms of suggestions for clarity, one thing that I felt like got a little bit muddled was the difference between offsetting the budget with E&D versus sending the money back to the towns. I get it, but I think that just in terms of clarity of the presentation, that could be separated out a little bit more.
Can I ask a clarifying? Would you feel like, and this is to everyone and to Paul, would we have been better off? And I'll be honest with you, we made a jump all of a sudden to FY24. Would it make it helpful if I paused after the recommendation, like just paused after FY23? And so we're recommending the use, or we're requesting a budget amendment, and we're requesting the use of $1 million in E&D, and stop it there and take questions and answer any clarifying things, and then perhaps move on to the FY24 part of the presentation and do it that way.
I think definitely. I would suggest we even vote on that part first.
Okay.
And then we do the second part of the presentation as the discussion after that.
That's what I was going to suggest, because they really are 2 separate decisions. And even I have a different opinion, at least right now, on each section. But I think there's more room for concrete discussions if we do it one at a time. And also the result of the first one kind of influences the second one, or might, depending on how it goes. I mean, if it doesn't pass for some reason, we have a very different discussion ahead of us for the next part.
Right. No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I was going to say, Barry, are you listening?
So cool. Yeah, that I think will help clarify that issue substantially. The only other thing that popped into my head was the $250,000 number. I understand why it's not 0, because that'll harm relationships with the towns. I understand why it's not all of it, because that'll leave us bankrupt. Is the reasoning behind the $250,000 number specifically because it gets 2 towns under the 4% versus, I don't know, 100,000 versus 200,000 versus 300?
Go ahead, tell them.
It's kind of arbitrary.
Okay.
I mean, I think when
He
we
was at 200,000. I went to the bathroom and I came back and I said 250.
And so I think the thought process behind it, ultimately, I think what the towns would have liked for us to do, and we would have gotten all of them under 4% or very close to 4% if we gave them about $400,000. I think that was the number we had
I think
looked
it
at
was a little
prior.
more.
Was
It might have been
maybe it's 450?
600.
Was it?
I don't know. I don't remember. Neither here nor there.
And so
Yeah.
we know we can't exhaust E&D. And the truth is, Paul, maybe we are better off doing less than that. I think we were just trying to say, like, okay, well, it seems like we're, like we really are trying to accomplish the things we're saying. But in complete honesty, it is a little arbitrary where we landed. I wish we had a more concrete reason, because I could say to you that I wonder if we crunch the numbers at 200, would we still get two towns, Paxton, Princeton, under 4? And we might. And maybe
When
we
I,
should.
when I look at the chart, that was going to be my suggestion if we could, because it looks like it would be under 4%, and $50,000 isn't nothing in discretionary spending potentially.
I think it's a very valid point.
All right, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So I have Linda and then Scott.
So that may be relevant to my point of, could we shave the amount of E&D we use down below $1 million? And this is purely for sake of public relations. Maybe we could do that. Maybe shave just a little bit more off of circuit breaker and with school choice, the other revolving account. I just think it might be wise to get it down below the big 1 million.
No, and we could, Linda. I think we could look at that. We were just trying to look at the choices, and again, I think we were, I understand your point about the visuals of $1 million, and we hadn't thought of that, so I think that's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Scott?
So 200 does keep them under.
Really good. Scott, I think you're muted.
Scott, you're on mute.
So I was unmuted and then I muted myself to talk, which was fun. So yeah, so first of all, great questions, everybody. I was saying, like, a lot of my questions were already answered, so I appreciate that. Real nitpick on slide 4, when you're showing numbers over $1 million, I just feel like it's like, why show the cents? It seems like round it off to the nearest dollar would be my suggestion. It's a nitpick, but yeah, whatever. I did put, but probably most people saw this, but I took the time while we were talking to look up all of the E&D numbers we've used since 2008. It's in the chat. So it was 0 for a long time, went to 850 when we were having trouble passing budgets, and you can see what it was the last few years. I think it shouldn't be lost on anyone that this E&D money we're spending for last year, for this finished year, means we're actually contributing almost $2 million in E&D to last year's budget. Right? We could have done $1 million, we could have done an extra $1 million last year to get to the budget that we wanted. We didn't do that, but we spent a ton of E&D money on the FY23 budget between the two expenditures. I agree with Linda. I think it would be fantastic if it was like 950,000 we were expending rather than $1 million, just for public relations purposes. And I do think, personally, I think we should give something back to the towns, just because we did sort of set that expectation, at least in Paxton at the town meeting that I was at. We didn't promise it. We said explicitly we couldn't promise it, but there was sort of an expectation set that we would look at it and vote on it. So if the committee decides to vote it down, that's fine, but I think we at least need to bring it up as a proposal to the committee. And just lastly, we need 13 votes to pass the first part, the E&D. Otherwise, we are emptying all those revolving accounts. I guess it's good to have as a backup plan in case, for whatever reason, that motion doesn't pass tonight. At least we have a way to get through the year. But those were my things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Malia, do you have another question?
Oh, there we are. My other, as we were listening to this, I realized, do we need to clarify the process from this? Is this the typical E&D scenario where the towns have 45 days to call a special town meeting and dispute it if they would like, et cetera, et cetera? So I think, I don't know if that hurts us or doesn't, but I think at least for transparency's sake that it might be helpful to provide that at least to the school committee ahead of time. I don't know if you want to mention it in the meeting or just make school committee members aware of it, but I think that needs to be clarified, that, you know, what the process is going forward. And even if we do this, if one of the towns says no, or actually if two of them, I think, say no, then we can't spend it anyways. That I just think we need to be clear about the process.
I think they're that.
What?
I think they have to.
Well, they don't have to approve it. They have X number of days to hold a meeting if they want to vote it down, essentially.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but
We
I think
actually
we
met
have
with
to
this-
hold the meeting, we have to do it by 6:30, but they also have to approve it by 6:30. So their time actually runs out on 6:30.
Okay.
Yes.
I
That's
didn't
what
know
I'm
that.
saying,
So
right?
that means, so that basically, okay, so then I will add this then, just so you're aware. I mean, I don't think any of them will reject this, because the FY23, they might though, theoretically, but I don't, I guess I'd be prepared for this question, and I don't know how to answer it legally. But if their time runs out on the 30th, then we're not actually giving them enough time to object to it, even if they wanted to. So I think we need to be aware of how that might come across. In
Yeah.
other situations, we have given them time and you know.
Malia, we actually, we met with someone from the state.
No.
Last week, Jana and Jim
Jay
and Michelle
Sullivan.
and I met with Jay Sullivan from the state, and we talked about this. And so what was just said is accurate. Technically, they have 45 days, but once the fiscal year is over, like they can't reject it anymore. So we are putting them in kind of a weird position where they could potentially reject it, except there's not time to do it. So part of the thought when we talked about giving them E&D funds for next year too was a little bit of a sweetener for that reason. We were kind of thinking probably they wouldn't want to reject it anyway because it's not costing them anything. So there would be very little value in any of the towns calling a meeting to reject something that had no financial impact on them. But we thought that, you know, it did, from a PR perspective, it was good to combine that with something that gave them back a little bit of money for next year. So we did have that discussion. You're right, it might come up tonight. And it is just a strange thing because we're so close to the end of the fiscal year.
I think, Scott, you said that perfectly.
That's great. And I think strategically you can decide if it's worth discussing or not. But I think just from a school committee perspective, people just need to be, at least the school committee should be aware of the process, which, you know, we can do by email, or you can decide you want to share at a meeting. But I think we just need to know. Thank you. That's it.
Tamara, I see your hand, but I just have a quick question for Scott, because it is almost 5:20 and there is something else on the agenda as well. So because it seems like Jim and Michelle are going to go back and possibly rework some numbers, I'm not sure that we can do any motions in this meeting to say that we voted on X, Y, or Z before school committee meeting, because it sounds like we don't have the exact numbers to potentially make a motion to vote on that to show what business and finance thinks, or am I off on that?
We're okay too. I mean, Michelle and I were just talking. Look, if the recommendation of business and finance is for us to get the number to 950, and then also to make an adjustment for the excess and deficiency recommendation to move it to 200, and Michelle crunched the numbers and it does still get Paxton and Princeton under 4, we're happy to accept those recommendations if you want to vote on those numbers.
Okay, so I guess my question is, Scott, is that something you would want from business and finance before the full meeting?
Yeah, I think this proposal should be coming from the administration and business and finance. That would be my preference, is that the business and finance takes a position that you're recommending these things if we bring it to the full committee. I don't know that it's technically required, but I think that would be good practice to bring a recommendation from business and finance for these numbers.
Okay. All right, thank you. So before we
Look,
get to that,
Jenna, quickly, very quickly.
yeah, I was going to say, I was going to go to Kamara and Linda really quickly, and then we can go to that. So Kamara, you're next.
Decrease. Just do the school choice. Just keep it on.
Oh.
I apologize. Did we miss a question?
Kamara, do you still have a question, or are you done? You're on mute.
So, sorry about that. Okay, so one quick thing before, I know we've gotten allusions of this coming forward. At any of the town manager meetings, did this come up in this detail, or would tonight, i.e., or today's meeting, be the first time it's coming up?
So Kamara, I had a town manager meeting on Monday. Paxton and Sterling were the only two towns who attended. And so I did share this information with them. Really what I shared with them is that, at that time, we didn't even have the numbers. I shared with them that we were having a special school committee meeting. I shared with them that we were worried about FY23, and we felt like we were going to have to move forward with a budget, FY23 budget amendment request, and that I thought that we would be using that we would be requesting the use of E&D as an additional revenue source. And I said that it was on the agenda potentially to recommend an adjustment to assessments with E&D as well, but didn't know where that was going to end up. And so that's what I shared with them, because that was all publicly available on the agenda, and I definitely try to keep them in the loop. I didn't follow up. We've been running around a little bit. I did not send a follow-up to the other town managers who did not attend. My assumption is, though, that they all had seen the agenda when it was put out. But I don't know.
Oh,
But
okay,
yes,
good to know.
I did talk about it at the town manager meeting, yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. And so actually, John, I'm gonna go right back to you, and then we can, if you guys wanted to look into making those motions, just like Scott said, that might. I kind of agree. It seems like a good practice to have the two administration and BNF make any such recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Kamara. Linda, do you still have a question?
Just wanted to note that in our motion, they should have the flexibility to add more from the revolving accounts if needed, if the math doesn't work out, something to that effect. That's all. Just shave a little bit more off the revolving accounts if needed.
That's what I did, and it actually kind of works out a little nicely. It's like we're going to use 940,000 from revolving and 950,000 from E&D. It kind of evens that out a little.
Okay, great.
Okay, so as far as motions, Scott, do you want us to go with the ones that you have for the full school committee count, or do you want them to be different?
I think you need to just vote on the recommendations for the numbers, but yeah, go with the ones that we had for the school committee agenda. I think, just as clarification, we don't need the one about transfers. It sounds like that we don't need a motion for that, right? So we'll skip that one. It's just the budget, the E&D, and then the E&D for the following year. So it's
Okay.
three votes.
Okay. Does anyone want to make any of those motions at this time?
I'm willing to make a motion, but we always have votes on transfers, and I don't understand why we wouldn't need a vote on transfers.
It's a good question, Linda. I heard Michelle say we didn't need it, but I don't.
I
thought we
if
did.
it's something you have done previously, then that's fine. I don't think by law that you have to vote on transfers, but you can.
Oh,
Hurting
well, then
anything.
if you're sure that by law we don't have to, then it might be better to not, because to give you the flexibility to transfer whatever you might figure out between now and the school committee meeting.
There's a general motion to allow the superintendent to appropriate funds from revolving accounts as needed I've seen done in previous school committees.
Okay, that works. That works.
Like it's like a general.
Mhm.
So we would need to vote on that, though, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with
I was gonna
that.
Yeah, that's true. We can, go ahead, sorry.
We were gonna say too, we still have that July meeting, so if the school committee wanted to see, or we wanted to, or felt like there was a need for the detail, we could approve that like we did last year during that July meeting, that July 10th meeting that we have coming up.
Okay, but I'm willing to make a motion to give the superintendent authority to transfer funds from the revolving accounts to the, I don't know, cover the costs of the FY22 budget as needed. Does that work?
I don't know, can we make them that open-ended?
Wait, what?
Could we make it that open-ended? I feel like that's like,
I tried to raise my hand, it didn't go up. There's something in a policy, which I don't have in front of me right now. And I think MGL that says we have to approve, the school committee has to approve transfers from one line, not line item, but
Appropriation.
thank you, appropriation area to another, and it must specify what the purpose will be as well in general. So I don't know if that extends to revolving accounts, but that is what we've had some fairly general motions, but they're supposed to include things of that sort. Now, I don't know if that extends to revolving accounts.
yeah, I don't know about revolving accounts either.
But that's what we've typically done something of that sort at the end of the year, because there's usually more than just revolving accounts going on. So
So, wait a second. Scott just sent something in the text to me.
That's just the policy that Malia was just, I linked the policy.
thank you. That's what I was referring to. Also, what was not followed by the previous administration that helped get us in this mess.
Right, but is that MGL or is that just our policy?
I don't know.
I think it's policy.
I think it's just
So-
policy.
In Mass General laws, you do need to vote transfers between like budget categories, like going from services to salary, if they're like major budget categories. But I also think there's an exception to that in like the last month of the fiscal year that gives you more flexibility, as I recall. And there's less voting that needs to happen. Yeah, but I'd have to look at the details. But I think Michelle is correct. She does not need a specific vote for these transfers. I trust Michelle having
I'm
a
trying to
general. Yeah,
I'm trying to find, Randy had sent me the and you might have had it too, Jana, like the motions that were done in like the last June meeting, or maybe it was July meeting,
I
and
have
it had a
I forwarded it
specific,
to you.
just now?
No, earlier when I sent you that one from Janet,
Okay.
it lists I
All
think
the
what
motions,
recommendations
yeah.
are.
and if we did that last July, that suggests we don't have to do it tonight. We could put it in the next.
Yeah,
meeting as
that's
well.
what I was trying to refer to, Scott. If you
No,
guys
I think
to get to that
I
level.
think that's July 15th, right?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you have to do it by, absolutely, Janet, that's it. Yeah, I have to do it by July 15th. And so if you said to us, hey, we would like you to bring forward what the specific, transfers were, we'd probably be in a better spot to do that and get the numbers right if we did it at the July 10th meeting on that Monday.
Okay. So I think really what we're looking for is motions that authorize the use of X amount of money for certified excess and deficiency. I mean, I don't know if you guys have the agenda for the main school committee meeting, but they're basically similar to that. So it's not that we're authorizing anything because we can't, but it's would be more that a motion to recommend that we use X, Y, and Z, if that makes sense.
Yes. And I was actually trying to pull up the agenda, so bring up those specific numbers too.
I'm trying to find them because I want to make sure I get the wording correct in the minutes.
You want exact, sorry,
Right.
still trying to find that.
And I-
motion. Sorry, I'm going to get off of trying to find that motion and so you need some exact amounts.
Not for the I don't think we need to do the transfers right now. Keep working on the transfers if you want, but I think what we would want business and finance to do is we want a motion to approve the general fund appropriation. I don't know if we need the total amount or the additional million or 950,000 or whatever we're putting in. So, but we need a recommendation for that, for what the FY23 total budget should be. I would guess that we would want to approve the total amount. So whatever we've already approved last year, plus the 950 or whatever we're going to add this year. I think we need a recommendation for that. Then we need a recommendation for the use of an amount of certified excess and deficiency funds as a funding source for the FY23 budget. And then we're going to need a third one to authorize the use of a certain amount of excess and deficiency as a funding source for FY24. So I think it's those three motions. Does that make sense to everybody?
I thought we were holding off on FY24. I'm sorry.
The FY24 is to reduce the assessment to the towns, that part.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Yeah.
From the Business and Finance Subcommittee, I'm just looking at the interest in time, in the interest of time, so we can have the exact numbers and the motions we need for the full school committee. Does the Business and Finance Subcommittee need to motion the same thing, or just motion to support us for going forward to the school committee for them to, like, are you trying to do the same motions?
I think so. My personal opinion, it would be nice to have those three amounts. So if it's the total amount for the budget, and then the authorize of 950,000 for excess and deficiency, which is I think what I heard, and then the third motion would be to authorize the use of 200,000 or whatever that number is for the FY24.
Okay. So
Okay, sorry. I was going to say, Michelle, if there's a really valid reason at the next meeting that numbers are slightly different, then obviously those motions can be made slightly different from the ones that we recommend with discussion. This is just at least where we are now. Does that make sense?
Yep. So the total budget for FY23 is 110,086,380. And that should be, just let me double check the math to make sure it's really the right amount.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Hold on. Oops, nope. I'm up a million. It should be, hold a minute, hold. So we're doing 950 and 950 will end up being 1.8 million. So, oops. So 110,000, and I was off, by the way, 110 million, sorry, 036,380. Hold on just a minute.
Okay, so what if we take them one at a time? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I think I put the wording in the chat, so I'll just.
Did you want to know what
Yes.
appropriations that we were adding to? Do you need to know that? That's just
This
how
is
much.
just the total.
This
This
Yes,
first one's
this is
just
the
the
total budget.
Do we need to include the word amend instead of to amend the FY general fund appropriation to total the amount of, or something like that?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you think so?
My guess would be yes.
I feel like we should be nothing else.
Because we are amending what was already done.
I actually don't think that you need the exact wording for that now, but we should figure that out for 8 o'clock.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. This conveys the general approval, so that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's the motion, is that right? Okay, and who's making that motion?
It's published everywhere as 381. So you have to have that end in one. My spreadsheet says 380.
I can make it.
You know what I think it is? Would be like the appropriation, just happening things.
Okay, so does anyone want to make, Kumar, are you raising your hand to make the motion?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, 1 second. I want to make sure I got the wording right here. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the FY23 general fund appropriation. Hold on. I'd like to make a motion to amend the FY23 general fund appropriation in the amount of $110,036,380.
81. 81.
Oh, sorry, that's right. $110,036,381.
I think we might need a slight edit to that.
Because we're not amending it by that much. It's now
Right.
totally
Okay, okay, so to amend the FY23 general fund appropriation, so that it totals 110,000, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense, or is that not precise enough either?
Maybe just to the amount of 110,000.
To the amount.
Yeah, that's
Well-
an excellent point.
I think that kind of works, to the amount. I think that
Does
works.
the
That works.
motion need to include language that we're motioning to support the amendment to full school committee?
Yes, I think to recommend, yes.
Okay, so let me try this again. So I'd like to make a motion to recommend to approve the FY23 general fund appropriation to the amount of $110,036,381.
Wait, you want to make
Can I make
a,
a slight
you want,
edit?
you want to recommend to amend or to approve?
I think we have to amend. Can I read something to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I have. To recommend to the full school committee that the Wachusett Regional School District amends the FY23 general fund appropriation to the amount of $110,381. Does that work? Let me read that again. To recommend to the full school committee that the Wachusett Regional School District amend the FY23 general fund appropriation to the amount of $110,036,381. Does that sound right?
I have a clarification to that because technically the district does not amend the budget, the school committee does. So I think if it said to recommend that the full school committee amend the FY23 appropriation to the amount of. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. To recommend, I don't think we have to call it the full school committee. Say to
however you wanna
recommend
phrase
that
it,
the
yeah.
school committee amend the FY23 general fund appropriation to the amount of $110,036,381. How does that sound? Kumar, are you moving? That's
Yep. So moved.
Second.
Okay, I will go to a roll call vote. So Leah? Oh, actually, wait a second. Wait. Before we go to a vote, technically, does someone want to do the numbers? We have to do the weighted voting.
Oh, is there a spreadsheet?
Jim, do you have the spreadsheet?
I can do that.
I think that Randy sent the spreadsheet to us.
I think
There was one
also
embedded in the link.
There's one embedded.
The weights won't matter unless it's close, so you could go vote.
No, but you still do need it, but
Okay, so we'll start again. Okay, so Leah,
yes.
Uh-oh, my audio just went off. What the
I
heck
can
happened?
still hear you.
I can
Linda.
hear you.
Okay,
I can hear everyone, but yeah.
I hear everyone again. I don't know why. Okay, so Malia voted. Who else voted?
You're next.
Aye.
Yes.
Paul? Tamara?
Yes.
Scott, are you voting today? And
No,
I'll vote yes.
I don't vote.
You
Okay,
don't
so
vote,
that's
okay.
unanimous, right? Is that unanimous?
Yes, unanimous.
All right, and in chat we have the. Thank you, Scott. I saw you just put in the second motion for the E&D. All right. So yeah, if you no objection, I'll go ahead and read it. To recommend that the school committee authorize the use of $950,000 of certified excess and deficiency funds from the excess and deficiency account as a funding source for the Wachusett Regional School District FY23 budget.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? No? Okay. Malia?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
I think I'm next. Dubois, yes.
Paul? Tamara?
Kumar, yes.
Okay, and I vote yes as well, so that one's also unanimous.
Yeah, the third one, I think we'll list the actual appropriations to the towns tonight, but I don't think you have to do it right now if you just do the other motion.
Okay, sounds good. So without objection, I'll go ahead and read that one. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the school committee authorize the use of $200,000 of certified excess and deficiency funds from the excess and deficiency account as a funding source for fiscal year 24, and thereby reduce the assessment to the member towns.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Any discussion before we vote? No? Okay. Malia? Do you want me to come to you last?
Yes. No, I mean, yes. Come to me last.
Yes,
Linda?
Linda, yes.
Dubois,
Paul?
yes.
Tamara?
And Kumar, yes.
I vote yes.
Malia, if you
Yes.
vote yes, then you have to do the math on the Excel spreadsheet.
I'm sorry. No, I'm gonna vote no, but that doesn't mean I won't change my mind tonight. It depends on what I hear tonight. So, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Motion passes.
Yeah, by the spreadsheet, the motion passes
And-
with 78%.
Okay, thank you.
Does the chair vote? No? Or you abstain?
Are you talking about
I
me
voted.
or Jana?
No, Jana, you voted. Okay, thanks.
No, I voted. I can vote. Right? Scott, I can vote.
Yeah, I think the rule, it's not really a rule, but in committees larger than 12 people, the chair is supposed to abstain or something like that. So this
Okay.
is, you should
Clearly
vote
not
in the
12.
subcommittee. Yeah.
Right. Okay. We don't have that many people. So, okay. So I think that takes care of that. Jim, does that give you guys enough to go on for the meeting for tonight for that portion? Oh, you're on mute. Jim, you're on mute.
Very helpful. Thank you. Yep.
Now I'm on mute. I know we're over. Does anyone have a couple of minutes to go over the communication to towns on capital improvement projects? What's on the agenda?
Yeah, and John too. As far as I can see, guys, I had a ad hoc that I moved, thinking that we might go over. So unless anybody has any, I'm okay too.
Thanks for
Okay.
doing that, Mara.
Thank you,
Oh, no worries.
Kamara. Okay, so we have communication.
I've got
to
some
towns on
hungry
capital
kids.
improvement.
I'm gonna turn off my camera and start making dinner, but I'll pump up the volume and next to the stove.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Mhm.
Okay, Jim, did you want to speak to section 4, communication to towns and capital improvement projects?
Sure. One of my hopes was that if we approved excess and deficiency for FY24, reducing their assessments, that we would consider sending a communication to the town specifically of Rutland and Holden and request that they take the amount that's being returned as part of their assessment and put it towards unfunded capital improvement requests during the FY24 budget process. And we talked about this a little bit last night in facilities. It certainly doesn't make them do anything. I guess I look at it similar to the communication they sent us requesting that excess and deficiency. A portion of it be provided in terms of the budget. It makes an official record on our behalf that we're frustrated perhaps that these weren't presented formally and allowed to have member citizens vote on them. At this point, I was joking a little bit earlier, John did an incredible part on trying to get these grants, but we did not get the grants. And so I don't feel like the total cost would allow Rutland or Holden to cover what those security improvements would cost the towns. But I feel like it's an important point because it was frustrating that both of those weren't at least brought forward for the citizens to consider at the town meeting. And so my thinking is it allows the issue doesn't go away. We share what we believe is is that we did our due diligence and provided the information. Who knows? They could approve it. But if not, we've at least given official response that that's what we think the appropriate thing would be to do. So.
Okay,
I'm-
Vinny, Scott. Go ahead. Lynn.
Am I up? I'm conflicted about that because I see your point about making our point, but there seems to be confusion about what exactly the towns understood, because communication, at least in Holden, goes through one person who shall remain nameless. And I think there may be confusion about what exactly was communicated and what the expectations were. And since basically we're letting them know that our budget overall is really, for lack of a better term, still very problematic. I'm not sure that that's wise at this point, at least in writing. But I might be too nice.
Yeah, I'm not. If I came off as snarky, that's not my intent. I mean, I honestly always want to try to take the high road, and I definitely don't want to get into like a mudslinging situation with the towns. I also want to politely let people know we're not going away, and that I'll give an example. Last night at facilities, Shannon had, I guess, and I haven't watched this, but I guess there was some comments during I believe it was select board meeting that we had submitted a proposal. The proposals we had submitted were the Paxton proposals. And, I printed out the 3 very specific proposals we had for Davis Hill, for Mayo, and for Dawson, and gave them to Shannon and said, nope, this is what we got in terms of proposal, and this is what was provided. And so I think it's an attempt to not hopefully, and this is my intent, and that's why I would share this with everyone, because my intent is to, at least provide our own interpretation of what happened. It's not meant to accuse anybody of doing anything, but saying, hey, we think this was missed. And it's an opportunity if they now have funds that they didn't anticipate getting to put them towards school security, which
Mhm.
was discussed ad nauseum with a group of the chiefs of police and fire, had been presented during town manager meetings, and was presented during our presentation to FinCom. And so that's the only thing. I'm honestly not trying to be antagonistic. I'm actually just trying to, to support, our feeling that we were trying to do the right thing. And here's an opportunity for one of those towns to reconsider their approach, or if something was missed, and look, even if it is like, we blew it, okay. But now there's money to support it, and wouldn't it be great to support an initiative that's going to make for safer schools? That's all I'm looking for, or that's my thought behind it. But again, that's the intent. But if it would be received that way, that's not what I'm trying to do.
I just wonder if it would be better just to make a statement rather than have a motion. It's one possibility. I'm not sure what Jana
Yeah,
wants.
I don't. No, sorry, I'm like literally in and out of a dancing ballroom here. That's why my camera's up. So it's chaos here. So I don't know that Jim, were you looking for a motion per se?
I think I was just trying to explain what my thought process was. And, I certainly don't want to put the committee in a position where they feel uncomfortable or they don't feel like it's the right way to approach something. And so I was really just looking for feedback. And if people feel like it's an okay course of action, sure, I'd love for us to pursue it. But I was just trying to explain, because I understand Linda's point. I certainly don't want to make things worse, but I also want to advocate and be a voice for kids, and, I think, I don't want to speak for facilities, but I think that subcommittee is a little frustrated that, we feel like we did what we needed to do. And it appears that way when it was, I think it's going to be supported. I think Princeton's going to use some ARPA funds, I think, to support it. Paxton went through their, capital improvement process with us. We presented at one of their capital improvement subcommittees, and it, it didn't, and it happened, it was funded in Sterling, but it wasn't funded in two of our communities. And, I think it's the delicate balance of gently advocating, because that's part of our job, to advocate for kids, I believe. And also trying to be mindful of trying to build, positive relationships like we talked about earlier. So I think I was more just proposing it as a potential course of action, and really just throwing it out there. If people don't feel like it's the right course of action, I understand. I was just kind of putting it out there.
Leah?
Yep. I was going to ask, I watched the meeting Shannon was talking about, so I won't go into great detail, but there was a lot of misinformation. I feel like, is there a way to send a letter without necessarily tying? I'm indifferent if it's tied to E&D, actually. I kind of feel uncomfortable with that, but I also understand saying something like, well, given that you have E&D and you have excess funds or whatever, we'd like you to consider this. I'm fine with saying that, but I also know that could be taken as trying to tell them how to spend their money, which ironically is what they do with us. So it can go either way. But I guess, is there a way to send them some of the background information in a public, a letter to the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen, without necessarily raising the question of, without tying it to that? It's just a question. I don't have an answer to it, but I think it's important to send them factual information. The people that are saying that they didn't have it. Well, they did, and we know they did. I was in the meeting with the FinCom in Holton. They absolutely did. And they said they'd get back to us with questions. So we don't need to throw that in their face, but can we send the documentation of what was already sent to them, and this is what was talked about, and these are the proposals? Can we send it to them, being proactive, and urge them to consider finding a way to fund it? Because I don't know what's involved in that. They probably will say they need a town committee or town meeting vote anyways, but at least we can provide the information without necessarily telling them, and set the record straight without telling them that they, screwed up or that they didn't do something.
And I'll be honest with you, Leah, I think that's more antagonistic than what I'm proposing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think that's saying, hey, here's all the proof that we actually did this, and you saying that you didn't. Here's the proof that we did. And so my thought is if they feel like proper standards weren't followed, and that's why it wasn't on for the town meeting, that we would request that they reconsider this proposal, because now they have the opportunity to put some free cash towards it. And we can't tell them how to spend their money whatsoever. We're just requesting that they consider it. And if it was an honest mistake and people feel like they want some further backup, we'd be happy to meet with them and provide it.
I just feel, I understand what you're saying. I do feel like in some ways it can be done in terms of, we want to move the conversation forward. We want to make sure everyone who has questions has all the information. Otherwise, it's going to be spun. It's being spun by someone who has no say in the process, to be perfectly honest. I watched the meeting. It's absolutely ridiculous what that person said. But I just feel like there needs to be some giving everyone the same information in Holden, at least the town manager, the FinCom, and the selectmen, and saying, here's, we need to move forward together on this, but making sure they all have the same information. It's not really our job to do that technically, it's the town's job, but they're obviously not doing it. So I don't know. I don't know the solution. That's just my thought of the day.
Sia Kumara, go ahead.
Sure. What I want to point out is, as I'm hearing about this, and so this would be going into my third year here, and I'm not labeling any one town and being responsible for not completely having all the information. If it was an oversight, it's easy to admit. If it wasn't, or if there's something else going on, okay, no one will ever know. My thing is like, I do sometimes wonder. I mean, due diligence was done to get this information. And my question would be, like any fair level-headed person, what would have been better to communicate it next time? Do you need a return sender receipt? Do we need to send this certified mail? I mean, and this is something I brought up last year because this is not the first time this has happened. It's a little aggravating to see a repeat situation of this. And then the aggravation follows suit with the fact that there's no further explanation. And so last year, I understand the mea culpa that certain towns may have done that. I let it go. This year, I cannot be that forgiving. And personally, I like, to other people's points, how that money is spent is totally, it's a decision made not just at a town administration level, it's made at the taxpayer level. There's other things that go into it. I completely understand. But I think personally, I'm along the lines of some communication needs to be sent. And, to be facetious, I'm going to send it certified mail if it was me. I don't, if we need to have a special committee meeting one night and then invite everybody over, we did it for when we presented the budget. So there can be no more miscommunication is my point on this. I think that ship came and sailed when I let it go the first year. And now I'm a little aggravated that I'm seeing the repetitive themes recurring again. To me, if you don't have the money to spend on a capital improvement project, you don't have the money. When I first was presented the capital improvement project plans, there were countless lines, that never even went fulfilled. So to me, it was like, at least it was acknowledged, not that everything on there had to be spent every year. And I think that's something that gets lost. But here's what the can gets kicked down the road of what doesn't get done. I think as a school committee, we're going to have to sit and realize, okay, so now because certain things have not been getting done, and if they're not even getting talked about at a town administrative level or at a town level, then I think it's the onus is going to fall right back on us, and that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with. I mean, so I'm torn. I see what the arguments you guys have all made, but I do want to point out this is not, in my personal opinion, the first time this has happened. In fact, going into the third year, it has happened every single year, and I'm at a point where I want to quench whatever the miscommunication that's getting conveyed or whatever is happening in the background. Like that needs to stop. 3 years in a row, and I have different examples that I can cite. And Superintendent McCall had examples. We have examples here. I'm just a little frustrated on that. I mean, it's easy to just say, if you don't want to spend the money, don't spend the money. Ask your taxpayers. If you don't, okay, fine. But just don't gloss over it, I guess is my point, And so that's where some of my frustration on this comes in. So anyway, so those are just some of my thoughts.
I'd be interested to hear what Jana thinks, our third Holden rep.
Sorry, I was just checking on Dan, so I can speak quickly, and then I'm not gonna lie, I might be looking at that, so it might be hard for me to talk. Now it's saying I lost connection. Are you guys there?
We can still hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. I just can't see you. Okay. I'm pretty much Team Kumara on this one. It's very frustrating. If there is something that on our end is not being done that we can do to improve the communications and confirm receipt of things, or some sort of process by which when we send things, it's acknowledged that they are received and officially either approved or denied to bring to town meeting or whatever. I think that needs to happen. And so whether it is something like Kumar suggested, where we sit down with said
Now I think we lost Jana.
Yeah.
Darn, she
The
was
one thing
talking.
I also think is, that associates or suggests that, and I feel like this always happens, like, what did we do wrong? And I usually ask that question. I'm going to be honest with you. I almost always ask that question. What could I do better? What could I have done differently? All that stuff. It's part of my practice, and I take it very seriously. I feel like the message that needs to be delivered, though, here is we're not going away. And we feel like we followed the process. If it got missed or it got muddled, okay. But please, if that's what happened, take another look. Here's an opportunity for you to take free cash and put it towards it. So if you weren't able to consider it the first time, maybe you'll consider it the second time. And if you don't deem it worthy, that's fine. But it doesn't, I don't think that kicks the can down the road. I think it keeps it in the present. Instead of like, oh, we'll give it another run this year, I think it keeps the conversation in the moment and asserts our belief that these are important projects to be considered, and that we do believe that we tried to partake in the process in a way that would allow towns time to ask additional questions. And so that's why I'm suggesting this course of action. I don't mind doing the follow-up. Hey, we could even put in the letter that if you have questions about these requests, that we're happy to meet with either the select board, the FinCom, or the town manager, because I don't mind that happening. But I feel like what it does do is it puts us in official communication saying, we feel like this is important. Please consider the use of these funds. And I'm not doing it. I'm not suggesting it because I want to be antagonistic. I feel like what it does do is it doesn't put us in a position where we're like, we're sorry, what did we do wrong now? It says, this is important. You're getting back some money. Please consider the safety and security needs of your school. And if there was a flaw in the process, we'd be happy to sit down with you and talk about it more. If you have questions about these specific proposals and we can give further information for you or answer any questions, we'd be happy to do so. But please consider this. That's all.
So are you suggesting that we send them a letter, or do we need a motion for tonight? No, well, Leah, Janice says you should take over. Sorry.
Yeah, she's at a dance competition, so she was going to have to drop off.
Oh, did she get kicked off again? Oh, she got kicked off again. Okay. No worries. I'll just jump in. Okay, so you want to know if we need a motion, correct, Linda? I think I heard Jim say earlier that he was just looking for feedback and a discussion and didn't necessarily need a motion. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's on the agenda. I feel like it's one of those things that if the committee doesn't feel comfortable signing off on such communication to those towns, that's fine. You know, I mean, I just, in my role, I make recommendations or suggest things that I feel like will move issues forward in the interest of the district. And my intent isn't to have an antagonistic relationship with the town. So if the school committee feels like, well, this is going to make it more antagonistic, I wouldn't want to do it. That's not my intent. My intent is to gently affirm that we feel like it's important that the towns vote on capital improvement requests of the district that are approved by a school committee, and that choice is brought forward in town meetings for taxpayers to consider. That didn't happen this time around, but there's a new opportunity, a new opportunity to kick that ball or kick that can. And please consider using some of this free cash that you'll be getting if excess and deficiency is approved for FY24 to reconsider some of these requests. And if you need additional information, happy to meet with you and provide it.
So are you?
I could hear you now,
Oh, you can.
but
Okay, I'll be
my
quiet.
battery's really low, so I'm just gonna
Stop. Okay.
be kind of quiet.
Okay. So my question then, in hearing that, is to clarify: would you feel more comfortable if the full committee passes something saying that they agree with this approach later tonight? And if so, would you want this subcommittee to pass that first, or did you just want to have a discussion about it?
I guess I feel like it's gonna have more power if we're going to approve the use of excess and deficiency to reduce town assessments, to do this at the same time.
Okay.
I think that if we wait until the July meeting to have this discussion,
Right.
it's very possible that the message we're going to get is, yeah, we've already made plans for those funds.
Okay.
And I feel like, you know, one of the things that you said earlier, Leah, is that we have to be mindful of what is being communicated out there. And I think this is an opportunity for us to take advantage of a school committee meeting and talk about the fact that, because I think we're all frustrated that school security improvements in two of our towns don't seem to have been considered. And there haven't been ways, like I don't want to get into a public shouting match or mudslinging incident. That's not what I'm looking for. But I am looking to advocate politely for the needs of our students in this district. And I feel like that's our job.
Okay. I'm just looking at the time. So, all right. So I think that makes sense. My caution or yes, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm gonna just, as long as it happens after we approve the E&D funds and have those discussions, I think that makes sense. So do you need a motion from this subcommittee before this evening, or did you before this evening to recommend to the full committee that this letter be sent, or are you comfortable with feedback you've gotten and then bringing it forward later? Thank you. That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page.
I think facilities, I spoke about this last night, and facilities, and I think they would approve this approach. Again, I can make the recommendation or request that school committee consider my communication to request that the two towns consider taking the free cash and putting it towards capital improvement requests for safety and security. And then ultimately, it's the committee's will whether or not they want to include that recommendation. But I feel like as superintendent, it's important for me to respond to some of the things that are out there and to raise this as an issue that we're gently advocating for.
Jim, can you write that in the chat? Because I can't understand the executive again. Just write exactly what you want.
And I don't think we need a motion for that. I was just trying to put out
Yeah.
what my hope is tonight. And if anybody here, I presented it to facilities, but if you are all like, don't do it, that's a crazy idea. I think you're putting us in an awkward position, then I would want to hear that from you, because that's not my intent.
That makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure we were giving you what you needed from this meeting. So that does make sense to me. For some reason, I cannot find my copy of the agenda. I'm laughing because I had it up and now I can't find it. So I want to make sure you had everything you needed from us. And I don't know if, okay. Yes. Jana says Jana has a comment in the chat. She says, we agree we need to solve the communication, but not sure we should ask for E&D use. It seems like we are helping them out, but then telling them what to do with the money. So that's Jana's comment.
And so I feel like personally, and I'm a resident of Holden, that Holden didn't need the help, to be honest, in what they are, that they have a capital improvement request that wasn't considered. And I feel like the right thing to do is request that they consider that. And they don't just like they sent us a communication about making E&D available and that we didn't meet their 4% budget concern. I don't think it's inappropriate for us to say, please consider the use of these funds for unfunded capital improvement requests. We're just making a request, and I feel like we want to, it's like we want to, talk about how we don't believe that we feel like they're creating a different narrative about what happened. But on the other hand, I don't want to politely ask for, okay, if there's a miscommunication, please consider that there's additional money now. Please consider these requests. If you know more about it, let us know. That's just my feeling.
Jana has another comment. Happy to discuss and ask for them to cover the funds. They can do it however they want. So I agree with the letter and ask them to cover it, but maybe not use the use of funds we are giving them. So I think she's saying that she agrees we should ask them to consider covering it but not specify the E&D.
I guess what I'd say is this communication, or we would talk about this after the E&D use would potentially be approved. It's a moot point if the E&D isn't approved for FY24. I also feel like the timing is part of this, right? I feel like there's been some comments made during these public meetings that haven't been addressed. And so I think what it does is puts our feeling out and puts the issue out there in front of us. And again, we're not telling them to do anything. If they want to look at the communication and say thanks but no thanks, we'll do what we want, they can do that. And so it would be different if we said to them or sent a communication previously like, hey, if you let us know you're going to use this money to fund our security requests, we'll give you some E&D. But that's not what we're doing.
Right. Not contingent.
So I just use it.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. I think you have a pretty good sense of some thoughts that we have, and I'm sure the full committee will have some additional thoughts. We'll have people from our smaller towns and our larger towns, and if I were a smaller town, I would be very annoyed because they're doing their job and others aren't, and it's an equity issue as well, which I would definitely mention personally in the discussion, because some of our schools are going to be safer than others because these towns didn't even bring it forward. So I definitely think that those things should be brought up. Are there any, I see the next thing is adjournment. So are there any other comments on this topic? Okay. Is there anything else administration needs from us before the meeting tonight?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Jim, can you hang on just a second? I have a couple of questions for the later meeting, but everyone else
yes.
can leave.
Oh, okay. So after we adjourn, you want to stay on? with-
Yeah, I just want to talk to Jim for a second to prepare for the 8 o'clock meeting.
Sure. I do not have the spreadsheet in front of me. Is Paul still here to do the recording? I
Yes,
think
I
it'll
am.
be unanimous, but okay. I'm just gonna go down the list. I can see because Jana can't hear people.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes, we do. I was gonna
I
get to
move.
that.
Linda moves.
Linda moves to adjourn. Is there a second? Can I second? I can't. Can I second?
Second, sorry.
Oh,
Mute wasn't
Kumar
working.
seconded. Okay. Jana, can you vote? Yes, Jana is yes. Kumara,
Kumar, yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that is a unanimous to adjourn. And Jana said thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you, Jana.
Thank
Good
you,
luck.
everybody. Thanks
Thank
for
you
meeting
all.
on short notice. I really
Bye-bye.
appreciate it.
See you all
Thank
later.
you all for your support.
I don't know if this is still being recorded.
I think it is until Ed gets off. Scott, can I send you a new link and maybe we
Yes,
can talk that
absolutely.
way?
Yeah, I think that's a better idea. 'Cause
Okay.
So we can just talk.
Thank you very much. Sounds good.
Thank
I'll
you.
send it right
Bye-bye.
now. Thanks.